Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This video, I'm going to cover a little bit more in detail on how to put an offset in sheet metal. Now, if you've watched my series where I took a truck fender and cut it in half and glued it together with metal bonding adhesive, I didn't really show too much in detail how I made the offset, so I'm going to break that down for you in this video. So I've got an old, I think it's a Honda fender, I've been using for other videos. I cut that in half, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to just show you how to put the offsets in this panel, so when the top one lays on top of the lower level, it's got that offset in there, it's nice and flush. So there's a few different tools I use, and it depends if you're going to glue it, if you're going to weld it, so a little different procedure for both of them. So I'm going to get started and show you how that works. The most common place you're going to do a seam, an overlap, or a butt weld, whatever you're doing, is usually in a quarter panel, on a sail panel up along the roof rail. So it really doesn't matter where you're going to be doing it. This procedure still applies to no matter what. So the first thing you need to do is identify where you're going to put your seam. And you want to take and get the paint removed from probably 2 to 3 inches each side of that cut line. And you want to do that before you go ahead and cut stuff and cut your relief notches or do an offset in there, because if you wait and grind the paint later, you're going to have to try and get it out of all the little areas, the little corners and stuff. So just get that done out of the way ahead of time. You got to do it either way. You got to remove the paint, so just do it. That's your first step. And this fender here, since it's actually on a taper, the way this thing is made, I can't take the front part of the fender and put it on top, but I can go the other way. So what I'm going to do, just roughly gauge about 1 inch. That's what I want to make my offset. And I'm going to take this and just clamp it together, and then I'm going to scribe a line on here. Okay, there's my line. Now I'm going to take masking tape and follow that so I got a guide. That way when I cut my relief cuts, it's a little easier to see than trying to just get right up to the scribe mark. What I'm going to do next on this fender, I'm going to mark everywhere there's a high spot or a low spot where I want a relief cut. If you look at this here, it's not perfectly straight. It has a little dip to it. If you tried to offset this right here, it would come out flat, and we have to leave that curve in there. So I want to put a relief cut in here. I'm going to cut this edge up here. Here's a low spot. I'm going to cut in there. And this same way, it's got a slight crown to it. So I think I can probably get by. We'll do 2 cuts there. And what I'm going to do with this bottom half, I'm going to do this a little different. I've got these offset pliers here. These will only offset about 1/2 inch, which isn't enough to glue, but it's fine if you're going to weld it. So I'm just going to take this bottom section, and I'm going to cut this off this way. I'll put a relief cut in here, and I'll use these pliers to do an offset on here. The rest of this I'll do with a hammer and dolly and some other tools. So I've got a cutoff wheel in my tool. I'm going to trim this off, and I'm going to use that to put my relief cuts in. Hey, these offset vice grips here, these are made by Blair Equipment, Flint, Michigan. I've had them for years. I don't know if they're still around anymore or if you can find them. Okay, you should be able to see the offset in those jaws. And they do a nice job. But like I said, you're only going to get about a ½ an inch out of it, but these work real good. You just take these, put them on here, and you just work your way down. You have to make sure you give yourself enough room. You can see the scribe mark on there. The offset is right behind it. That way that top panel lays on there, it comes right in here. You don't want to try and start the offset on your line because it'll push this offset too far towards the end. But I think you can see that in the light there, and that does a nice job. But that's not enough to glue a panel on. It's fine for welding. So I'm going to show you how to do this by hand and get all this put in there. Okay, let me show you this on my whiteboard here. Sometimes it's hard getting everything on video. You can't really see what I'm doing. But to put the offset in, the first bend I'm going to make, I'm going to just take and bend that flange down like so. That's what you're going to see me doing first. After that, I'm going to put the second offset right in here. And I'll be doing that with the chisel end of the hammer. And that way when we set our other panel in, it'll lay in here nice and flush. Okay, now we're going to continue with this offset. And what you need to do, you need to get something to support this right behind this scribe mark. And if you can get a dolly in there, that's fine. If you're working on a sail panel on a car, usually there's not much room in between the outer quarter panel and the inner reinforcement. You can't get anything in there, so anything you can find. This comes in real handy here. You can slide it in there, and all you want to do is support this back here. And the first thing we're going to do is bend these panels down. So I'm going to use this instead of a dolly. And all we want to do is just get our offset started. Okay, now I want to start putting the offset. So what we're going to do, we're going to support this, and I'm going to use the chisel end of this shrinking hammer, and we're going to start driving it not on that line, but about right in here. If you've watched the video where I talk about work hardening, so once we've bent this, it puts a little bit of work hardening into it, not a lot because we didn't do much of a bend, but that'll help to keep that offset in there, this first one, while we're working on our second one. Okay, and you can see right here in this corner, offset shows up a little bit better, but this panel is lower than this one now. You can see where it drops off here. So that should be fairly even across there. Once I finish these last couple, I'll take that fender, the back half of it, lay it up here and see how it looks. Okay, I think this shows up with the light on it. Should be able to see that pretty good, and it come out pretty nice. Fairly even all the way across here. These little edges on the back side, you can just kind of fold them in a little bit. But we still got the original contour here where the relief cuts let us bend that nice and even. So I'm going to take the other half of the fender, slide on here, put a couple clamps on it, and see how it looks. All right, that come out pretty good. Now, one thing, this fender isn't the best thing to demonstrate on because we're shortening the whole thing up so our edges don't match up. But if this was a panel that you're mating together on a car, you're gonna be sectioning the thing so everything is even. You're not gonna be shortening it up, and that's why I end up with that, so the lines aren't exactly right. But you can see everything feels nice and flush here. All these corners will line up good with your relief cuts. If you don't do the relief cuts and you're just gonna overlap it, these will always be high, and you'll grind them down if you're gonna weld it, glue it, whatever you're gonna do, and you'll put your filler on there, and those are always gonna show up as a high spot, and then you've gotta really take your filler out farther. This way here, it gives you a nice flat surface. Using these vice grip offset, you can put a nice edge on there, but it's not enough to glue, and these aren't deep enough to go in. If they were a little bit longer and you can get an inch out of it, it'd be great. But otherwise, you just do it by hand, and it doesn't take much time. A little bit of practice like everything else, but it does a nice job. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of detail a little bit more and show how I do these by hand. All right, like any procedure working on cars, one way isn't the only way to do it. There's lots of different ways. So this is just the way I've been doing it. A couple different techniques with the pliers, with hammers and dollies. And like I said, sometimes you can't get much behind here. You know, a tool like this will work. Improvise anything. You could get a big screwdriver if you can hold it up in there. Anything with a little bit of an offset or an angle in there, whatever it takes to do it. But anyway, I hope you learned something from this video. Thanks for watching.